Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology, and I want to welcome you to my June Astrological Forecast for 2024. The theme for the early part of this month is We're All in It Together. And the reason I came up with this theme is because of the preponderance of the element of air that's taking place with many of the aspects that are occurring in the first part of the month of June. In astrology, everything is divided into the four elements. We have water, earth, air, and fire. Water is generally about emotions. Earth is about the things you own. Air is the way you get along with other people. And fire is the element of the spirit. So let's back up a little bit and talk about air. Air being the element that talks about the way that you get along with other people. All relationships are ruled by the element of air. And a fascinating thing in astrology is that love is ruled by water, but relationships are ruled by air. That's because when you feel love for someone, that love has the potential of being unconditional. You love that person with the fullness of your being. Also, when you feel love for someone else, that person doesn't necessarily have to be existent or present in your life. You can have a secret crush on someone and that person can have no idea about what your feelings are. That can be love. You can feel nostalgia for an earlier time in your life when things were more pleasant or warm or nurturing. That can be a sort of love. And then you may feel love for someone who's passed on, a beloved friend, a spouse. And that also applies to pets. That is also love. These are examples of how you can love someone or something without that thing being present in your life. However, the reason relationships are ruled by air signs is because there has to be another person that's present in your life. That person could be a sibling or a close friend, as espoused or symbolized by the zodiac sign of Gemini. That person can be a partner or a spouse, is symbolized by the zodiac sign of Libra, or that person can be people, the society that you live in, the culture that you grew up in. These are all associated to the zodiac sign of Aquarius. So relationship, the understanding with a relationship and why air rules relationships is because people don't have to be thinking the same way. People don't even have to be feeling the same way, but they can still be in a relationship with one another. And this is why air rules over relationships. You need to be in a relationship with someone in order for a relationship to exist. When we take this kind of thinking and apply it to the idea of we're all in it together, we tend to think about, well, our own personal loves or our own personal aspirations or our own personal pride or maybe even our own personal spiritual beliefs or even patriotism. We don't always factor in the presence of other people into our lives. We'd like to think that we do that, but that's not always what happens. For the air signs, particularly with Gemini, there's always a factoring into their own lives where another person stands. Do they feel close to someone? Do they feel remote to someone? Do they like someone? Do they not like someone? Is someone going to help them get from here to there? Or is someone going to prove to be an inconvenience? Rivalries are ruled by Gemini, just as close friendships and close sibling relationships are also ruled by Gemini. The idea is we are both in it together. And this is the message I want you to think about as we get underway with the zodiac sign of Gemini at the beginning of June. So the first aspect that we will be experiencing at the onset of June is the Jupiter Pluto trine that will be taking place on June 2nd. Anytime you have a trine between two planets, this means that there is an innate understanding that exists between the two planets. They're not in conflict, they're not misunderstanding one another. One isn't doing all the talking while the other one is scrolling through their phone. There is an innate understanding and sympathy and support between the two planets, and the two planets are showing up for one another in their cosmic allegiance. And this is what's taking place with Jupiter in the zodiac sign of Gemini, an air sign, forming a trine to Pluto in the zodiac sign of Aquarius, which is another air sign. The motto of this trine is, you cannot succeed unless others succeed. Now, that's a very different take on a Jupiter-Pluto trine. Jupiter is the ruler of the skies, Pluto is the ruler of the underworld, and these two planets have a tendency to talk about power and to talk about taking power for oneself, or if you're on the wrong side of them, genuflecting to them because they are a much more powerful force than you are. But when you've got a trine taking place between Jupiter and Pluto, this idea that I can't succeed unless other people succeed goes from being a good principle or a virtuous principle to actually a very wise action to take in your life. If you had a Jupiter-Pluto trine taking place in fire signs, it would be about personal fame. And let's take water. Let's say you have a Jupiter-Pluto trine taking place in water signs. This would be about having absolute creative control. All right, so there is a feeling of control, maybe even dominance, that takes place whenever Jupiter and Pluto get wind of one another. But what happens when they trine in air signs is that the things that benefit one person must benefit everyone else in order to work. And that's not just listening to the voice of your conscience. What it speaks to is that the fortune of air signs is uniquely tied to the fortunes of others. Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius must ally, partner, or collectively bargain in order to get done the things that they want to get done. They cannot get it done on their own steam. They cannot get it done on their own accord. They have to, because these are air signs, work with other people, even if these are people that they cannot stand or really, truly revile. So one could say, well, what about coaxing? What about cajoling? What about duping? What about manipulation? Working with someone's mindset in order to get them to go and do the things that you want them to do. Is that out of bounds? Is that foul play? Well, it is when you're dealing with these two signs. And it is because Jupiter is the planet of good. Okay. And Jupiter stands for the force and the power of good in one's life. So Jupiter believes in the maxim that good begets good and nothing else will do. So there can be a moral and sometimes even a righteous quality to Jupiter. When it trines, when it flows into the air currents of Pluto in the zodiac sign of Aquarius, what it's also invoking is Pluto. Pluto is Jupiter's brother in Roman mythology, and where Jupiter ruled over the skies, Pluto ruled over the underworld. What they both have in common is justice. Jupiter raised people up to elevated heights if they were just and good, and in some cases, Jupiter even turned them into constellations. And Pluto, the lord of the underworld in Roman mythology, was responsible for separating the good from the evil. You can think of it as separating the wheat from the chaff. Pluto, being named after the god of the underworld in Roman mythology, has a faculty for sniffing out the snakes in the grass, is probably the best way of putting it. They can always smell when something's up and when something's awry. And this comes out with a very, very strong Pluto. So when Jupiter forms a trine to Pluto, this is the time when you want to listen to your better angels, because heeding your baser instincts will only cut off your air supply. The signs most affected will be Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. Following on the heels of this magnificent trine is Mercury entering the zodiac sign of Gemini on June 3rd. This is wonderful because Mercury is entering into the zodiac sign that it rules. And Mercury in Gemini always reminds me of Rimsky-Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee. All right. When you have Mercury in Gemini, you are chock full of ideas. Your mind is on overload. You have so many ideas that are just flying around, buzzing around your head. And in some cases, with Mercury being in Gemini, these can be more ideas than you know what to do with. So, like a circus juggler, you have to split your focus in order to keep all the balls in the air. You can't concentrate too much on one task or one objective or one goal, or you will risk losing control of all the balls. Now, since your mind will be darting hither and thither during the time that Mercury is in the zodiac sign of Gemini, you're probably going to discover rather soon that you may not be able to develop all the ideas you have in your mind past their initial stages. In other words, you may have these wonderful ideas and you really want to act on them, but you're being tossed another idea, another idea. So because you're juggling all these ideas in your mind, you don't really have an opportunity to develop them. So in some ways, what might be a good idea is to jot down these ideas. Make a point of choosing maybe one or two that are the strongest. Why are they the strongest? They might be the strongest because they're ones that you need to act on right away, or they might be the strongest because they're the most appealing. They might be the strongest because they have a short shelf life. But in any case, what you want to do is choose two of these ideas that you feel are the strongest. And these two you're going to give a little bit more focus to and take past the initial stages of development. A good image to keep in mind with this is like if you've ever gardened and you put seeds down in the soil. It's exciting when one or two come up and you're like, oh, these seeds have come up in the soil. But then there's 3, 4, 7, 10, 11, 12. They begin popping up all over the place. And in order to foster growth, you need to pull out the other seeds that are sprouting. You need to thin the seedlings. And that's the idea you might want to keep in mind as we get maybe about 2 to 3 weeks into the month of June. That way you can cultivate and you can nurture ideas that you feel really have the ability to go the distance. The signs that are most affected are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. June 4th brings a Sun-Venus conjunction, better known as Venus Cazimi. Venus Cazimi means that Venus and the Sun are at the exact same place at the exact same time in the sky. Venus goes from being in the rays of the sun to being in the heart of the sun. It becomes even more spectacular. Now, one would think, oh, Venus Cazimi, that must mean that she's extra glamorous, especially beautiful, unfathomably fabulous. Well, it's a little bit more than that. What happens when Venus is Cazimi, when she enters into the heart of the sun, is that she becomes even more attractive. Now, Venus in astrology is an attractor. The sun can be, for instance, very magnetic and very charismatic, and it can draw people to its energy source. Venus is more concerned with attracting people into your life who are like-minded or who have the same feelings you have, the same sense of humor, the same taste. Okay, and this is because Venus wants to populate your horoscope with as many people who like you as possible. This could mean popularity. This can mean people just being in your corner and supporting you. The best way to sort of think of Venus and the way that she works in an astrological chart is like collecting likes on Instagram or YouTube or a Facebook page or TikTok or whatever social media you happen to be operating in. The more likes you collect, this is Venus at work. This is what she does. She brings in the likes, the people who are going to be the most drawn to you and who are going to enjoy your company and whom you're going to enjoy their company as well. And this is because Venus believes that nobody can get anything done on their own. You need someone to be supportive. You need someone to make introductions. You need someone to show you how to work the room. Okay, and so Venus's job is to bring these types of people into your life so that you can populate your life and get done the things that you want to get done. Now, Venus is a benefic, which means that good things come to you through other people. So when Venus is Cazimi, you can expect gifts from out of nowhere. You can expect favors, and you can expect personal blessings. All of a sudden, people just want to gift you things. People want to do you a favor. They want to promote your growth. They want to see good things happen to you. So this idea of favor, this idea of blessing is something that happens when Venus is Cazimi. It's drawing that energy into your life. Now, it's probably been a long time since you've experienced this kind of wonderful attention. Contrary to what most people think, a lot of us get a bit bashful when we're showered with these types of things in our life. We're kind of like, oh no, it wasn't a big deal or whatever. And this is where it's really important when you're feeling a little shy to call upon your Venusian skills. What you want to do is thank people. What you want to do is really credit them with how they've helped you to get to this place where you are. And you want to really sort of turn the conversation to them. This is something that Venus in Gemini is particularly adept at. But Venus in an air sign, particularly in Gemini, is not going to just let you revel in the attention. Attention, as far as an air sign is concerned, especially a Gemini, attention is currency. In other words, if you are being showered with attention or shown attention, this means that you're getting to know people who could open doors for you. You're getting to know people who could connect you with other people. You're getting to know people who may have very clear ideas. You're connecting to people who may know how to get that apartment you want or that antique piece that you've been admiring. So this is the sort of thing that Venus is very attuned to when she's in a zodiac sign like Gemini. She wants to be able to make use of what the connection is. To be loved and adored is fine, but what's it really going to get you in the end? Venus in Gemini always has her eye on cultivating someone's patronage or asking someone if they might not introduce you to someone you've been dying to meet. Signs most affected are going to be Taurus, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. The new moon in Gemini on June 6th is going to make you feel a little bit scattered. Now, new moons are basically times when you want to set an intention. A wonderful way to work with a new moon is to think of it as a New Year's resolution. And maybe we should change that to a new month's resolution. So the new moon starts a new lunar cycle than the one that you have previously finished or completed. However, this new moon taking place in the zodiac sign of Gemini is going to be a bit buffeted about by all the cross currents and the things that are going on with Gemini. The moon has a tendency to be very serene and calm at night, particularly in a new moon capacity. But Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and this idea of buzzing hither and thither and being reactive to different types of information that are coming from all these different directions, this is not something that necessarily squares with a new moon's idea of setting an intention in a place of peace and serenity. So what you're going to feel is very much like you're being pulled in all directions all at once, and that you really don't know where to go. Like no sooner are you answering this call than there's another call or another request or another offer, another opportunity that's being made, and you may find yourself scattered in all sorts of directions. So what you want to do when you're being pulled in all sorts of directions with this particular new moon in the zodiac sign of Gemini is that you want to remain centered. Now, centered. What does centered mean? Well, centered doesn't mean that you have to be clear on what you want, because it's doubtful that you're going to be very clear on what you want when there's a new moon in a mutable sign like Gemini. That means the priorities and the choices, the options and the alternatives are on speed dial. One is flipping right after the next, after the next, after the next. So you want to remain centered, or you want to find your center, and once you find it, remain centered. But centered doesn't mean that you have to be clear on what you want. don't add that as an extra pressure to what's going on around the new moon on this time. Centered also doesn't mean that you even have to know what you're doing. So this isn't about being clear on what you want or even really knowing what you want to do. Centered means being there for yourself. So it's just, what do I think? What am I responding to? I may not have that answer right now, so I'm not going to manufacture an answer. I'm not going to make something up. I'm not going to say this is what I want and then change it again, and change it just another time. No, I'm going to remain centered in myself. And this is where, having just followed a lunar cycle in Taurus, this can help you. If you can sort of remember the fixity of Taurus, you do have to remain centered. And that idea of being centered is going to be good because there will be good and bad things happening to you in rapid succession during the next 7 or 10 days. You can have a good thing followed by a bad thing followed by a good thing. You're going from one to another, and they'll probably be happening in rapid succession. So what you want to do during this period of time, you sort of want that feeling of a rootedness like Taurus, but at the same time, you want to acclimate yourself to this Gemini energy. So I think that a really good idea for you would be to think like a tree. I want you to think like a tree. You are rooted in the ground, but you are not immovable. I want you to think like a tree because a tree will sway with the winds as they blow through the branches and the leaves. And the more that you can sort of bend during these winds of change, the more that you are going to avoid being uprooted, and the more that you're going to eventually emerge from this period of time with actually a clearer idea of where you want to go. And if that's not clear, at least a very clear idea of where you stand. The signs most affected are going to be Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, Libra, and Aquarius. On June 8th, Mars enters the zodiac sign of Taurus, and you're going to feel it right away because this is when you make the switch from unstoppable force to immovable object. Mars is coming out of the zodiac sign of Aries. Aries is a cardinal sign. It's fire. Aries is an unstoppable force. It butts heads with anything that gets in its way. Mars moving to the zodiac sign of Taurus is an immovable object. Your strength is in your immovability. It's in your perseverance. It's in your steadfastness. Now, this is going to be good with Mars changing signs because this is a period where you will need to stand your ground, where you will need to hunker down or push through a rough passage. Mars is the planet of strength and fortitude, and when it's in an Earth sign like Taurus, it's all about preservation and perseverance. Preservation, because you want to hold on to what you have. You want to preserve your gains, your accumulations, your winnings. And perseverance, you want to keep on going when the going gets rough. Okay, you will show toughness that one needs when the going gets rough to get through onto the other side. You're not going to give up. You're not going to throw up your hands. You're not going to go back the way that you came. Now, with Mars in Taurus, you get those qualities, those lovely Taurian qualities of being able to take a licking and to keep on ticking, just like the famed Timex watch. However, during this time, you can also get exceedingly territorial. That's because Taurus is the sign of the bull, and bulls, as we know, are all very territorial. So people horning in on your turf may make you see red, just like a bull sees red if a red cape is being flopped around in front of it and it charges right at it. And you could charge at people horning in on your territory without justifiable cause. So in other words, you may be reacting to anyone that you feel is encroaching on your turf or trespassing, and you may have a very Mars reaction, which is to charge at them, to attack them. Moreover, with Mars in Taurus, you could become ham-handed with dealing with delicate matters, sensitive topics, or fragile negotiations. There's a bit of a bowl and a china shop quality to Mars in Taurus. It's not particularly delicate, and it's not particularly sensitive. And like a bowl in that fabled china shop, you could find yourself backing up into things and knocking them down, or moving your head about and knocking things over and things crashing down to the ground, to the shock and horror of people around you, with the cashier making notes of how much all of these are going to cost. So these are things that you want to keep in mind. Mars in Taurus isn't always the most graceful presentation unless it really focuses on it, unless it applies a sort of athleticism to it. But another thing to pay attention to is to know when enough is enough. What can happen with Mars in Taurus, and Taurus is an earth sign, is that there is such a strong reaction to people trespassing on your territory. And there's such a strong insistence that you take as much ground as you can possibly take. Remember, we're talking about an earth sign here, that when you win the battle or when you win the face-off, you may not know when enough is enough. You may keep on going. You may keep on taking over as much territory as you can. What can happen here is that you may not be allowing your opponents to yield the field to you. The insistence may be so strong that you're still on this high alert. So when people are saying, okay, I agree, or I'm definitely going to get back to you on it, or, hey, you know what, if this is really that important to you, fine, I'm backing off. Let them back off. Don't go after them. Or if they're kind of like, wow, I'm really sorry that I offended you, so can we back up this conversation and start this again? Don't be the person who's like, no, we're going after them, or reaching over the table and, or asking, when are you going to get back to me? You have to know when enough is enough. When this kind of stampeding energy of Mars comes through Taurus, you have to know when enough is enough, and you have to know when to back off when someone is yielding the field to you. This is going to help you to keep the peace during a period that could at times be very contentious. Now, Mars will be in the zodiac sign of Taurus from June 9th until July 20th. The signs most affected will be Aries, Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. On June 9th, the Sun forms a square to Saturn. And this might be a time when you're asking yourself, are things over before they began? Now, it may look that way, and things often do when the Sun squares Saturn. That's because this is a sort of pulling the plug on a venture type of square. An exciting venture or budding opportunity might have come to a sudden halt. Now, that's because Saturn squares have a reputation for being spoilers. They often thwart our best-laid plans. But in their thwarting of our best-laid plans, they also test our resolve and our ingenuity. Saturn is the planet of limits. It's the planet that you come up against the limit, the restriction of something. Saturn rules over things like expiration dates. Saturn rules over a dead end. Saturn rules over that wall that you hit where you're completely exhausted. Saturn also rules over the bar being raised even higher than it was before, or the weight being made heavier than it was before. So Saturn is, ironically, a planet of limits, but it's also a planet about testing the limits. That's where some of the testing qualities of Saturn come into concern. So what is Saturn testing? Saturn is going to be testing your resolve and your ingenuity. These are two ideas that are going to be very particular to the Sun being in Gemini. Gemini is immutable. It's a very changeable sign. As far as a resolve, being, bent on just one thing, Geminis have a tendency to sort of nurse a series of different options and possibilities. And if something proves to be too difficult, they can have a tendency to move on to something that's easier. Geminis are really good at those tests that we used to take in school, where they would say, if you don't have the answer right now, stop with where you are, move on to the next question, and keep on going. And if there's time at the end, go back and fill in the blank. Geminis really are good at that. With Saturn forming a square to the sun in Gemini, it's going to be testing how much you want something, all right? Maybe it's an aspiration, maybe it's an ambition, maybe it's a prize, maybe it's a goal, maybe it's an accomplishment. The Saturn is going to say, okay, I see that you want this, and now I'm going to block your efforts. And if your response to Saturn blocking your efforts is to say, oh, this is really too difficult, or this is more than I bargained for, who needs this aggravation? All right, then Saturn has made its point, which is you really weren't that into it, okay? If it makes you back off, then you weren't really that resolved or that resolute, okay? You weren't really committed to that activity. And this is what Saturn will show when it forms a square to the sun. Now, what Saturn will also do, although Saturn sets up the limit or the obstacle, Saturn tests, do you have the wherewithal? Do you have the ingenuity to solve the problem? Can you figure out a way to get around that obstacle? And so this is something that can also potentially really sort of increase one's mental capacity of ingenuity, of deduction, of playing around with different ideas to get around something. All of those qualities are associated with the zodiac sign of Gemini. Gemini loves wordplay. Gemini loves throwing ideas back and forth between two people. Gemini loves asking why and why not, and questioning something, not because it's just being difficult, but because it's playing with the different possibilities of something. This is how Geminis progress in their lives. So if you are up to the challenge, but it's not like an Aries challenge, which is like, bring it on. Okay, it's not like that. But if you're up to the challenge and sort of like, oh, wow, this is a real pain in the butt. Let me try to figure out how I could get around this. If you're up to solving the puzzle, then you will be rewarded by this Sun-Saturn square. Signs most affected are Gemini, Leo, Virgo, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Pisces. On June 11th, Mars in Taurus will form a square to Pluto in Aquarius. Now, this is kind of a what's in it for me versus what's in it for everyone type of square. What's in it for me is coming down on the side of Mars in Taurus. Mars in Taurus is very driven to get the things that it wants and to collect them and to put them into their corner of the world and say, these things are mine, hands off. Pluto in Aquarius isn't interested in your little corner of the world. Pluto in Aquarius demands that you respect and honor everyone's corner of the world. And more than that, everyone come out of your corners of the world and everyone be in different spaces and interact with one another. So Pluto in Aquarius is always going to side with what we call the collective. In other words, what's good for everyone. And Mars in Taurus is not interested in the collective whatsoever. Mars in Taurus wants to defend what's theirs. And so the two of them are going to clash on this day. This could put you in a situation where you're being asked to sacrifice or to forego something. And if you're on the Mars in Taurus end of it, you're not interested in it whatsoever, okay? You don't feel like sacrificing or foregoing, especially for people who haven't worked as hard as you have worked, people who haven't earned the things that you have earned, people who haven't built the things that you have built in your life. You're there to provide for the people you care about, and you're not there to provide for ne'er-do-wells and for people who don't work hard for a living, and whatever one with Mars and Taurus is going to tell themselves about people that they feel just aren't up to snuff or aren't working hard enough or aren't embracing the Protestant work ethic. Okay, these are all going to be things that are associated with Mars in Taurus. Now, if you're falling on the Pluto in Aquarius side of this square, you're going to be feeling that your aspirations, the way that you see things working out, that is going to be for the benefit of everyone involved, is being thwarted by someone that you find is very selfish and very possessive and very materialistic and really isn't cooperating with what is good for the group. Okay, and so you may be finding yourself going up against someone who's very entrenched in their position. And as far as you're concerned, they're being very selfish about it. And this is going to have a counterproductive result. Are you just going to ignore this person or maybe move on to something else? No, this is Pluto in Aquarius, which is a fixed sign. You are going to get your way come hell or high water. And so what's going on when you have planets in fixed signs forming a square is that they are in a combative place and neither is going to give up an inch. The Taurus's motto is going to be like, I worked really hard for this. Why should I share it with people who don't deserve it? And Pluto in Aquarius is not everyone is privileged like you. Not everyone has had your benefits. You should give this to other people because the point of living on this planet is that we want to better lives for everyone involved. And when people get, selfish and territorial and materialistic, you spoil it for everyone else and you keep the earning gap going and all these horrible things. So as I said, neither side is going to back down. Both sides need to find some way to live with one another. Are you going to find it during this square? No, you are not going to find it during this square. That's not even the point of a square. The point of the square is to bring up these two very different ideas and let them go at it with one another. Now, the truth, like the resolution of this square, lies somewhere in between. In other words, there can be some sort of resolution. You can convert competition into cooperation by taking into account the other person's point of view, and that will be forthcoming. But during this square, my feeling is it's too heated and it's too immovable to be resolved right now. But if you leave the conflict with a second thought, if you leave the conflict thinking, I should have bent, then that's good, because what it's done is that it's planted the seeds for further conversation. The signs most affected are going to be Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. On June 14th, we will have two marvelous aspects taking place at the same time. We will have a first quarter moon in the zodiac sign of Virgo and Mercury Cazimi, meaning that Mercury will be in the heart of the sun on June 14th as well. So there is going to be a very strong mercurial flavor to this particular aspect. Now, what does the first quarter moon Cazimi Mercury mean to you? What it means is that it's all on you. What that translates as is that the victory or the defeat will be completely yours. It's a surprise, really, because you weren't expecting to hear back from a higher up or a client right away. You assumed that they would take their time to get back to you, that maybe they would want to mull over certain details or introduce specific guidelines, or maybe even impose some restrictions. That won't be happening. Not with Mercury Cazimi working with the energy of the first quarter moon in Virgo. Everything is sped up. Everything is accelerated because Mercury is a very fast-moving planet, and it also happens to rule the first quarter moon. So the last thing you're going to expect on this day is an unqualified yes. That means you have to deliver on everything you just promised. And that might leave you like, oh my goodness, I was expecting you to think about it a little bit more, to go back and forth a little bit more. I was into a sales pitch. That didn't necessarily mean I'm ready to go. Well, now with this Mercury Cazimi involved with the first quarter moon in Virgo, you've got to be ready to go. There's not going to be any sort of delay or anyone waiting on this. They have said yes to your proposal and they want to see your work immediately. So during this period of time, when you find yourself all of a sudden racing forward, I want you to keep in mind that this is a particularly clever and insightful combination. I don't want you to worry if it feels like you're flying by the seat of your pants, because it's when you're flying by the seat of your pants when you do your best thinking. Signs that will be most affected are Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, and Capricorn. Venus squares Neptune on June 16th. What that means is that you will want to beware Ponzi schemes or any sort of pyramid schemes that promises money for nothing and clicks for free. Things look like they're too good to be true when Venus, the planet of seduction, is forming a square to Neptune, the planet of illusion in the sky. And guess what? They are. They are definitely too good to be true. This becomes even more powerful because the square that's taking place between Venus and Neptune in the sky is taking place at the 29th degree of each sign. In other words, Venus will be at 29 degrees Gemini, and Neptune will be at 29 degrees Pisces. This is called an anaretic degree, meaning a critical degree, meaning that things are coming to an end or being wound up or resolved, and this is a very significant time. It's kind of like the landing of an airplane. All right, you're bringing things in for a landing, and so this is a very significant time. That's already charged and infused with a lot of energy just because of the square taking place at the 29th degree. The other thing to keep in mind is that this is the last time that they will be forming this particular square. Neptune will not be in Pisces for much longer, and it will be 200 plus years before Neptune comes back to Pisces. So this is the last time that Venus will be forming this square to Neptune in Pisces in our lifetimes, in all of our lifetimes. And so that's good news. But what you want to keep in mind is that both planets are famous for casting spells aimed at getting you to empty your pockets or to drain your bank account. So you're going to want to be very careful not to wear your heart on your sleeve during this period. And you're not going to want to be very careful not to be susceptible to get-rich-quick schemes that seem like they're wonderful opportunities, but are aimed really at separating you from your purse, your pocketbook, or your Venmo account. Thankfully, this spell doesn't last for very long. It will just be for a few days, and it will probably lift by the middle days or the later days of next week. The signs most affected will be Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Pisces. On June 17th, Mercury forms a conjunction to Venus. Never underestimate the value of gossip when Mercury forms a conjunction to Venus in the nighttime sky. In other words, gossip may not be the best way to get information, but at least it tells you what to look for, what to watch out for when it comes to chasing down a lead, running a background check on someone, or confirming a suspicion. Now, with Mercury conjunct Venus in this particular part of the sky, you can expect to have off-the-record conversations. In other words, someone might be talking to you and they might be saying, okay, this is between you and me, and I want this to be off the record, or I don't usually divulge this information, or I usually don't confide like this. And what you'll want to do because of this particular conjunction is that you're going to want to honor that confidence. You're going to want to say, yes, it's okay, you can have it off the record, and you're going to want to say, this is in strictest confidence, and I'm not going to repeat it to anyone else. And that's going to be very, very important because you're going to get a lot of information that you need. Maybe you're making a case. Maybe you're trying to prove something that happened the way that you said that it happened. And you're not going to be able to do this through the regular avenues. You're going to need the help of someone who can make information available. It will be made available through the auspices of this Mercury-Venus conjunction, and that will be a wonderful thing. In fact, it's going to allow you to make your watertight case, and it's going to allow you to prevail as long as you don't say things like, so-and-so told me this, or I heard it from this person, as long as you don't give away your sources. If you honor that people are telling you these things because they want to help you out, also respect that they're putting themselves on the line for you. They're putting themselves in positions that they don't have to put themselves in, and that it's up to you to safeguard that confidence. The signs most affected are Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, and Libra. On June 20th, the sun enters Cancer. Cancer is the zodiacal sign of hearth and home, family and roots, and the sun will be in this sign for the next 4 weeks. This is a period of time when you need to slow down and touch base with the things that truly affect you, like the love of family and the love of friends. This is a time when you need to slow down, restore, and enjoy the season of abundance, which is the summer, and which Cancer is the herald sign for. Now, your home should be a peaceful sanctuary. It's where you retreat to at the end of a battle-worn workday to find peace and solace. Not only is it a shelter, but it should also be a restorative place. Now, for the next 4 weeks, you will do whatever it takes to make your home your sanctuary, to make your home your refuge, to make your home your peaceful and restorative place, your safe harbor. This could range from home improvements to settling family feuds that have raged on for far too long. Home is where the heart is, and that's something that you will be experiencing right now. And if it's not something that you're experiencing right now, it's something that you will take action and to bring about over the next 4 weeks. The signs that will be most affected are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Scorpio, Capricorn, and Aquarius. When it rains, it pours. When Mercury forms a sextile to Mars on June 21st, you'll find yourself besieged with all kinds of offers, invites, and counter-offers. It's a heady moment, and you should enjoy it. Heaven knows you've earned it. But remember what I said earlier about that new moon in Gemini? How you may be suddenly accosted by all these types of opportunities and offers and things that are demanding your attention and things that are promising tremendous changes in your life? Well, this Mercury-Mars sextile is going to accelerate all of that. We have Mercury, the fastest moving planet outside the moon, forming a sextile to Mars, which is an accelerant. Mars accelerates whatever it gets near to. So while you are racing after these different offers and opportunities, like a Labrador retriever chasing a tennis ball, while you're doing this and collecting them all in your mouth and coming running back and saying, okay, this is a good one, this is a good one, that's a good one, you want to keep in mind during this flurry of favor not to break any of the promises that you have already made. Now, one in particular is going to concern a pledge that you made weeks ago, and it may conflict with a better deal or better opportunity on the table. You're going to be tempted to break it. You're going to be sorely tempted to break it, but don't, because it will come back to haunt you. If you have to stick with this and turn down what could have been a more lucrative opportunity, then do it. That's what giving your word is all about, and that's going to be very important during this period of time when Mercury is sextile Mars. And yes, you may lose out on what could have been a real sweet deal, but remember that we're under the auspices of the moon right now, and the moon is cyclical in its orbit around the Earth. So what didn't work out right now will definitely come around again and work out at a better time when you can probably use it. The signs most affected will be Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Virgo. On June 28th, there will be a last quarter moon in the zodiac sign of Aries. Now, you may feel like this is a make or break time, but I want to urge you to rethink it. The reason is that the moon in Aries always quickens the pulse and incites you to act in the moment rather than to wait and to weigh the consequences to your actions in the balance. Usually you would be right to heed these impulses when there is a moon in Aries. However, the last quarter moon is a waning moon energy. In other words, it's the quarter moon that follows the full moon, and the moon, after having been full, is now heading towards the next new moon. You don't really want to do anything under a waning energy. That's like adding a major plot twist in the final moments of an Agatha Christie novel when Monsieur Poirot is winding it all up by gathering everyone into the room and picking off people's explanations and manufactured excuses until he arrives at the culprit. You don't want to introduce something new when you are winding things up. And so this is why I would ask you to skip this period of time when you're feeling like things are very urgent and this is make or break and that you have to act now or forever hold your peace. I want you to hold back and to wait. The moon is waning in its energy, so your start is not as strong as you think it is, and it is moving towards a balsamic moon, which will eventually darken into a new moon. So what you're in danger of doing is acting too early or leaving right when you should have stayed. So forbear. Don't heed those impulses. And if you have to find a friend to talk reason to you or seek the advice of someone that you really trust their appraisal of things, then do it. Talk to anyone who can intervene at this point and maybe cool your engines. Because what you want to do is wait until after the next new moon to act on these impulses that you are feeling right now. Now, the signs affected are going to be Aries, Cancer, Scorpio, and Capricorn. On June 29th, Saturn turns retrograde in the zodiac sign of Pisces. And during this period of time, it's said that a planet acts in a contrary manner to the way that it usually behaves when it's moving direct. Saturn, we know, is the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations. So do we get a break when Saturn's moving backwards? I mean, it kind of makes sense if you think about it. I mean, if Saturn is the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations, and if Saturn is committed to giving everyone a hard time and making something that was easy access supremely difficult, when it moves backwards in the sky, when it turns retrograde, maybe this is a period of time when we're test-free, trial-free, ordeal-free. Well, if only we could be so lucky. No, this is not what happens when Saturn turns retrograde. When Saturn turns retrograde, there is a tendency for things that were slow to get slower. There's a tendency for things that were more difficult to just be even more immovable in terms of their progress. Saturn retrogrades, in some regards, can be regarded as redundant. It's Saturn, but more so. But there's a little bit more at work to a Saturn retrograde. And there's a little bit more to be learned to Saturn turning retrograde in the zodiac sign of Pisces. One of the images that comes to my mind when I think of Saturn turning retrograde in a zodiac sign of Pisces is the idea of swallowing. Swallowing is a very Saturnian image. We know this because when Saturn overthrows his father Uranus and takes over the universe, it's prophesied that one of his children is also going to overthrow him one day. And so Saturn, full of fear and anxiety, decides that as each one of his children are born, he will swallow them. He will eat them. Now, it's not like the Goya painting where Saturn's like, pulling at a child's carcass like a chicken breast or a chicken leg. No, it's more that Saturn swallows each of the children as they were born, and they fall down into the stomach of Saturn where they dwell in a sort of limbo, a sort of non-time. So as Rhea gave birth to each of her children, Vesta, Ceres, Pluto, Neptune, Juno, Saturn takes each one of the kids and pops them like a Pez candy, and they go down into his stomach where they reside in a non-time. Rhea does succeed in secreting Zeus away. He's the last one. And he grows to age and is going to come back and overthrow Saturn, and we all know that that's indeed what he does. But the reason why I sort of want to freeze at this moment, when he swallowed all the children and is convinced that everything has been taken care of, there's a kind of feeling of false security and anxiety. And this is what can happen when Saturn stops in the sky and begins to turn retrograde. There's a feeling that you have settled a situation, but there's still the sense of being in a predicament. You're trying to make yourself feel comfortable with something that has been forestalled or postponed in some sort of way. Maybe it's a decision that you've made that you weren't completely convinced was right. And maybe you're telling yourself, that was a good decision. I'm going to stick with that one. But there's still a sense of foreboding. And this is something which goes with the Saturn turning retrograde. Now, what can also happen with Saturn turning retrograde is this feeling of being on the horns of a dilemma or a predicament that you haven't really gotten off in the way that you think you have, but you are taking up a position of resistance, a position of this is what I'm going to do, and this is what's going to be very important to me. Another image that comes to mind when I think of Saturn turning retrograde and Saturn turning retrograde in the zodiac sign of Pisces is Jonah. I don't know if you remember the tale of Jonah from the Bible, but Jonah is a prophet who has been ordered by God to go to Nineveh. Now, Jonah is a pretty successful prophet. He's actually does really quite well, which is why God has chosen him to go to Nineveh, which is a famously sinful city full of debauchery, and to get everyone to repent. But Jonah doesn't think he can do it. Jonah doesn't feel like he can do it, and Jonah doesn't really want to do it. So what Jonah does is that he gets on a ship that's heading in the opposite direction from Nineveh. He's not interested in going, and he's going to head on this ship. Maybe God will forget all about this impossible assignment. Well, as you know, that's not really what you do with God. Not only will God not forget that he was given the assignment, but God stirs up a storm at sea. The boat is being tossed hither and thither. It feels like it's going to fall apart. The sailors are all frightened, and they wonder what has gone wrong that has stirred up the wrath of the ocean. And Jonah, who's down at the bottom of the ship, knows perfectly well what's going on. He's on this first name basis with God. And he's like, all right, someone's got to do it. I'll go and do it. So Jonah, the reluctant hero in this scenario, comes up from below deck and stands on the deck and says to the sailors who are frightened and scared and who really, like, masts are beginning to fall over and they're looking at a shipwreck here. And Jonah says, lift me up and throw me over the side of the ship. And the sailors are like, what? Are you crazy? And he's like, I know what this is all about. It's the only thing that's going to appease him. So lift me up and throw me over the side of the ship. And so they're like, okay. And they throw Jonah over the side of a ship. And just as they do that, an enormous whale comes out of the ocean and opens up his mouth. And Jonah goes right on down the whale's throat, down into the whale's stomach. And the whale swims away. And of course, immediately the storm subsides and everything is fine. And the sailors fall on their knees and are thankful. Jonah is not thankful. Jonah is languishing in the stomach of the whale. And he's like, God, you really... Sometimes you can be so fixed and obstinate, God. You know, it's your way or no way, and this is the way it's going to be done. You send a storm. Now I'm in the belly of a whale. And, you know, this is some fix you've gotten both of us in. And so Jonah basically is, from his position, he's considered this a standoff, that he didn't want to go to Nineveh. God was not on board with that. He wasn't on the same page with that. He sent a whale, and now he's down at the bottom of a whale. And this is something that Saturn retrogrades are famous for. Saturn retrogrades are famous for timeouts. Okay, this is just when the universe is going to call a timeout. You've been sent to your room or the belly of Saturn or the belly of a whale to think about the things that you did and to reflect maybe on your conscience and to maybe even rail at fate and be kind of like a little bit pissed off, and with good reason, you know, that this is where you have wound up. You might have taken an action that thwarted what fate wanted you to do. You might have ducked out of something that you felt was too big for you to handle. You might have been set up in a situation in which someone else has acted to keep you from progressing down that road. But nevertheless, Saturn has a very strong association with fate, and Saturn is not going to be thwarted. The children might have been swallowed by their father, Kronos, Saturn, but it's been prophesied that they will be freed, and that indeed happens. And in the same regard, Jonah is going to be freed from the belly of the whale. He's not going to end up rotting on the shelf like plankton in the belly of this particular whale. And so Jonah knows full well that that's what's going to happen, and he's just going to sort of patiently wait it out to see what the next chapter will bring. And in all true Saturnian stories, it's in avoiding what fate has demanded that someone winds up stumbling headlong into it. And this is the same case with Jonah. He resides in the stomach of the whale, and he's wondering if he's ever going to be released. And then one day there's daylight. The whale vomits, and Jonah is vomited up unceremoniously on the shores of Nineveh. And so God has gotten his way, and Jonah has shown up at Nineveh, and that is where he is. And so Jonah is still really resistant to this idea. He doesn't think he's up to the challenge of making this sinful city repent. But where is he going to go? He's covered in, plankton barf, and, and he reeks, and people are taking him in. And so he makes quite an entrance being vomited out of this whale. And maybe it's because of that entrance that he makes that the citizens of Nineveh actually really do listen to him, and they're moved by him. They're inspired by his words. And of course, they immediately repent their evil ways, and they find God from this prophet, who's covered in whale muck. This is kind of the story of a Saturn retrograde. We know where we should be going, and we may not be full of great conviction about it. And maybe in our anxiety and maybe in our nervousness, we have even sold ourselves short. We don't feel like we're up to the task, and so we're going to head in the opposite direction. We're not going to go down that path. We don't feel like we're capable of it. And so during the period of time of a Saturn retrograde, you get a timeout, and you sort of sit on the horns of this dilemma, and you get time to sort of mull over again and again and again. Are you really comfortable with this choice? Is this really the way that you want to go? Are you returning to a situation that you should have left? Are you denying yourself an opportunity that you should be embracing? And sometimes the planets will align in such a way as to sort of be in your corner and be like cheerleaders, and they can be really like, you can do it. And that can get us over an obstacle in its own way. But then there are times when the planets align in their courses, or there are certain planets like Saturn that turn retrograde, in which we get a timeout, in which we get to really sort of ponder something through things not progressing, through things not moving forward. And maybe what happens is that we reassess our ability. And that might come through contemplation, that might come through the tedium of limbo, or that might come from a great frustration. Sometimes when we are worn down by tedium, a pattern in our life that repeats itself over and over and over again, it loses its magnitude. In other words, something that we're very afraid of, or something that we resist, because we come up against this problem again and again. And so tedious becomes kind of a small deal, and it becomes kind of like, why don't I just clean out that drawer already? All right, it becomes mundane. And this is actually the magic of Saturn retrograde in Pisces. During this time out period, something that looked like it was too big for us becomes rather mundane and maybe even manageable, or maybe even something that we can confront and get over, a choice that we can make, that we're finally ready to make, because resisting making that choice has been far more difficult than just simply making that choice in the first place. So this is something that you may experience when Saturn comes out of retrograde on November 3rd. The signs that will be most affected will be Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.